Hi guys, today in the workshop we have a 2013 Vauxhall Insignia that's coming in for front brakes. This particular one is a 2 litre. On the smaller engines you may have some variation on the brakes, so just double check that before you get started. Yeah, let's get to it. First up, before we get started, it's good practice to open up the brake fluid reservoir. This way any fluid that's in the system that gets pushed back in the caliper later on, this can return here with a little bit less resistance. So we'll leave that there and we'll double check the level later. There are special tools you can use to get these plastic covers off, but if you are careful you can use a long nose mold grips. So as long as you don't touch the alloy, you just pull them off. These wheel nuts are a 22mm. What we're using is a special impact socket that has a plastic coating so that you don't damage the alloy when you're taking the wheel nuts off. So with the front wheels removed, we can see the condition of the front brakes, the surface corrosion that's built up on the main part of the disc, and the wear. You can see there's a little slight lip there. The top lip has worn away, but you can see how thin the actual disc has worn. And you can see the condition of the vents inside the disc. When we're looking at the pad, you can see there we're almost metal to metal. It's a little bit hard to see on camera, but when I take the pad out, you'll be able to see that. So first things first, let's get this caliper removed and remove the pads. So on the back end of the caliper, you'll have 2 bolts, one at the top and one at the bottom. These go through and secure it to the slider, which allows the caliper to move and apply equal pressure. So the actual caliper bolt is a 14mm. So we'll just put that spanner on that. And the inside is a 17. You might not be able to put a standard 17 on this. What I have here is a thin 17 spanner, and I'm able to put that on there and then crack it loose. I'm not going to take this off fully yet because I'll do the one underneath first to make sure they're both nice and free, and then I'll take them off together. So on the caliper again, this is the lower bolt, same as the top, 14 spanner, slide on the 17 so it doesn't all rotate together. These should be quite loose then, yeah. Take that off, same at the top. So now we should be able to take this caliper off. So then, using a screwdriver, we can gently prise it up out of its position. You want to be aware when you're levering that this brake pipe is still attached. If you want, you can detach it from here, it just pulls off, but we won't need to. Set this up to one side here. You don't want to leave it hanging because that will put too much pressure on the actual brake flexi. So again, using your flat end screwdriver, just try tapping that off. Depending on how badly corroded they are, some come out easier than others. And there's the condition on the front pad. You can see where it's completely worn away the friction material here, and you can still see the surface corrosion. So yeah, got the money's worth out of these front brakes. And here's the inside. Even though it's really bad, it's still a little bit better than the other side. So before taking the carrier off, I like to free up the disc. It's held on with a Torx 30. So what I like to do is give it a shock with a hammer. Some people just like to gun them off, but I find that's more risky, and then you tend to break the Torx 30 pieces. So with that flathead screwdriver, you can put that in the vents. Bear in mind we're replacing this disc anyway, so it doesn't matter if you cause a little bit of damage to the actual vent when you do this, because it's being replaced anyway. So with that screwdriver in, it'll hold it in place there. So with that off already, when we take the carrier off, the disc should just tap off nicely. So on the back end of the carrier, there's 2 bolts. These are 21mm, using a 1/2 inch ratchet and a short 21 socket. And crack these off. These are normally quite tight. Yeah, tight. And they should just lift away. Now, corrosion can build up between the disc and the hub surface, so this can be quite tight to come off. I do like to give it a tap in the front first of all to shock any corrosion. And we'll see if it taps off. There you go. Before we fit the new disc, while we got everything off, it's a good idea to clean everything down with a wire brush. That way when the new disc goes on, you won't have any old corrosion just in the way, making it not sit nice and flush to the hub. When you're happy, it's nice and clean, then it's time to get your new disc. So we've got our old disc and our new ones. We're using Delphi brake discs. When you open the pack, there'll be basically an instruction manual on how to fit. You can get rid of that. And your new discs will be in a separate bag. These tend to have a coating on them to stop them from rusting when they're in storage, so we'll have to clean that off. But before we fit anything, we'll have to compare them to the old ones just to make sure that everything's right. So once you pull these out the bag, with the old disc, set it upright with the new one next to it. And you should be able to see if there's any size difference. When you're happy that they are the right disc, you need to clean off any residue that was inside the bag that they came in. So a little bit of brake cleaner and a rag. Wipe it off, make sure you're happy they are nice and clean, and make sure you do it to both sides of the disc. Then you can fit your disc. Fit the screw. The screw is tapered, so it helps centralize the disc in place as well. Before fitting the carrier, same as the hub, we need to give it a clean up. So we can take off the shims that the pads slide on. Again, use a wire brush. Make sure that the surfaces are nice and clean. When you're happy that the surfaces are nice and clean and free of corrosion, you want to make sure that these sliders are able to move nice and freely. These moving freely and together is what makes sure that you can have nice even pressure on your brakes. If you don't have new shims in your kit, then you may just have to clean up the old ones before refitting. When we removed the carrier bolts, they were quite tight. That's because they have Loctite on them. You can see the blue tinge that's still in the thread there. We'll have to clean that off before they go back on, and we'll have to put a little bit of new Loctite on there to make sure that these stay nice and tight. Just using a wire wheel, gently take off the old Loctite and do that for both bolts. So the old thread lock was blue, and these tend to be color coded, so blue being a medium strength Loctite, and we're using red, so we won't put anywhere near as much on because red is the stronger type. What I tend to do is put a dab on the one, use the second bolt and kind of massage it through the thread. Well, that should be fine. So now we can refit our carrier. That should just slot into place. And we can start our carrier bolts by hand first. Last thing we want to do is cross thread these. And then you want to finish them off with a ratchet. All of these bolts have a specific torque setting, so you'll have to look these up for your specific car, because even though you may have the same year Vauxhall Insignia, sometimes there's variance on the brakes and these specifications can change. Under that Loctite, these bolts aren't going anywhere. What we are going to do now is push back this piston to allow enough space here for us to fit this over the new pads when they go on. I do have a specific tool in order to do this job, but for the sake of you guys at home, I'll show you how to do it, but with a larger grips. So something that you'd be more likely to find at home. So the specific tool will be this. It sits in there and then you can wind it back. So that will apply equal pressure onto the caliper and it just winds it all the way back. Another way of doing this would be to use larger grips such as this. You've got to be careful using these because you're only applying pressure to one side of the caliper, or the piston rather. Once that is sat back all the way, we can again just set this to one side here. Us pushing that piston back is forcing the fluid that was occupying that space back up to the reservoir. That's why we opened that bottle earlier on, so we can allow that flow of fluid. So the grease that we're going to use to put our pads into these shims and on the carrier is Brembo Be Quiet grease. Not sure how you can see all of that there. These just get put at each of the contact points for the pads. I'll put a little on the pads themselves just so that they go in nice and easy. And then just dab it with your finger just to spread it around evenly and make sure that none of it goes on the disc. Any excess that you do have, and just dab onto the pads. So when you're happy, got a light dab of grease on each of the contact points. Go ahead and fit the pad. Some people I've seen that they do put a little bit of grease here on the contact points of the caliper. You can do that, but I don't think it's really necessary. Most of these pads now have a coating on the outside, so that takes away from any squeaks or anything that you would have had previously. So the same goes for the inner pad. On the pads that we've had, notice that there's a wear indicator, so this will screech against the disc when it gets down to a certain level. You want to make sure the ones that came off, that this is the same as that one, and then we can just fit this in again. Nice and easily. It might be a little bit fiddly with the shim, but it should just pop in nice and free, so that these have a tiny bit of movement in them. Last thing you want is for these to get stuck in a certain position and stick on. Make sure that protective shim is on the back of the new pad so that it can sit against the piston that we push back in the caliper. So when you are happy with that, we can refit the caliper. Remember, gently place it. You shouldn't have to force anything here if the piston is all the way back. For the caliper bolts, you'll see when they came out, they don't have any residue from any previous Loctite. I've seen some people that they do put a little drop on just for peace of mind. That's what we will be doing, just a little drop on each, and then we'll be refitting them. So the same as before, with your bolts, you can feed them through and start them off by hand. I've seen a lot of people skip the part of starting them by hand, and they've ended up cross-threading them, and it just causes a lot of problems when you have to sort out a damaged thread. And then finish them off with a 14 and a 17mm spanner. So when you're happy that you've completed that one side, it's exactly the same procedure on the other side. So when you're all done, you can put the wheels back on. Don't forget to torque them to the correct specs, and then jump in the car and press the brake pedal. You have to press the brake pedal so you can seat the pads properly against the disc. Otherwise, when you go out and drive, your foot will go straight to the floor, and you don't want that to happen, especially on a road test. So make sure you pump the brake pedal first until the brake pedal goes firm, and then you can double check the brake fluid level. Once you're happy with that, you can pop the cap on, go out for a road test, and you should be all done, guys. So that's it for this video. I hope this has helped, and yeah, please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment if you have any questions, and I do my best to get back to everyone. Thanks.